Good afternoon, everyone. Um, Thanks everybody from joining. I know the participants have joined from all over Singapore, Europe, and the US as well. Welcome to our session of Merkle Meets. I'm Regank, one of the co-founders and the CEO of Merkle Science. Today's Merkle Meets is about the UAE and how it is poised to become a global hub for crypto innovation. So we've always seen exchanges such as Binance, Crypto.com, and Bybit have a strong presence in the UAE. Most recently, we've also seen Coinbase and Gemini announce that they will be starting entities in the region. So we've got experts, our moderators here who are going to be speaking about crypto regulations in the region, enforcement action, and whether the UAE is poised to become the leading hub for crypto innovation. So to start off, for those who are attending this Merkle Science Meets for the first time, Merkle Science provides predictive Web3 risk and intelligence solutions. It's a compliance solution for crypto companies and FIs. It's a forensics solution for law enforcement agencies and government agencies that look at cryptocurrencies. Moderators would be great if you can give a short introduction about yourselves and your role as well. Kokila, would you like to go first? Ladies first.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. This is the beauty of online. You don't know which part of the world you're addressing to. Okay, my name is Kokila. I am founder of Karm Legal Consultants. We're a law firm based out of UAE, and we work with clients in the emerging tech sector. Majority of our clients are either virtual asset service providers or issuance companies or blockchain entities, AI entities, and entities in the payment sector. And very happy to be here. And thank you, Mrigank and team, for making me a part of it. Thank you.
Alex, would you like to go next? Thanks, Kokila, for the introduction.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Alex. I'm the General Manager of Binance FZE. That's the entity that is becoming licensed in Dubai. So we'll be talking about sort of VARA regulations. But in MENA, we're obviously very happy with how the public and governments are partnering together and able to foster the Web3 economy.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Hafid, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Hafid Azmi. I'm a partner in PwC Middle East, based out in Dubai. I'm in regulatory and financial crime compliance, and currently I'm helping the banks and also VASPs on their regulatory and financial crime framework in the region, and also working closely with VARA on the licensing of the VASPs and coordinating with the banks and VARA on certain points related to the regulatory compliance. And I'm happy to provide my insights or view throughout the experience with the banks on how we can, as a VASP or as exchange, how to enhance your framework to be onboarded in UAE.
Great. So in terms of the first question, would be great to get different perspectives from the panelists here. I think everyone's keen to understand or a general overview of UAE's key regulatory developments and the different regulators that apply to them in the region, especially for crypto companies such as exchanges or custodians. What should they keep in mind?
Do you want me to start with? Yeah. So let's start with what is increasing this regulatory oversight, and especially 2022 was a very landmark year for the regulators and the governments to open up and start accepting virtual asset is something that, you no longer can say, I don't want to regulate it, I don't want a license. We saw the crashes, what happened in Terra Luna, what happened in Celsius, FTX, and it's just going on and on and on. So that has led to more than ever, the need for them to have regulations and laws supporting this sector. And the increase of fraud, market manipulation, you name it, and we saw all these frauds and the hassles that came up last year. Interestingly, UAE has taken a very progressive approach in this. So we started with the framework in, I think, 2018. Yes, was the first framework that ADGM came out, which became pretty much the first global regulatory framework for crypto assets that came out. Eventually, they amended it and it became a framework for virtual assets. But we've had regulations and laws in the country for an exchange or a service provider who would want to get licensed and provide a regulated financial services for virtual assets. So from 2018 till 2023, we've seen UAE going on in a very high speed in coming out with new and new regulations, amending it, opening it to the industry feedback, and being a very progressive entity, a country, where we've made sure that all the regulations are ensuring consumer protection and adoption of a very risk-based approach. So just to give an overview, a highlight of it, UAE has our Federal Authority, Security and Commodities Authority, that has recently come out with an entire framework for virtual asset service providers at a federal UAE level. We have our Central Bank of UAE that has again given a full guideline on that. If you're a virtual asset service provider, how do you go about dealing with the commercial banks in the country? What are the AML CFT requirements that one needs to keep in mind? We also have ADGM since 2018. And then last year, we also saw DIFC, an independent financial center in Dubai, that came out with their virtual assets framework. And then we have VARA, which is Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority in the Emirate of Dubai, deriving its legislative powers under ESCA and giving a full detailed 7 different rule books for different service provider in the virtual assets space. And what makes VARA stands out is that this is the first time globally we're seeing a bespoke regulator being set up for virtual assets. It's unlike everywhere else where in existing laws and regulations, one has tried to fit in virtual assets as a different asset class. Here we're now talking about a new regulator with an entire understanding and with a lot of market participation and an industry feedback, which they did for almost more than a year before coming out with their regulation. So we're seeing many regulators and nobody is saying that virtual assets is not going to be there, but yes, it is very much in existence and it's going to be as streamlined as fiat or any other FX that we see in the country.
Maybe what I can add something here. I think here, as a highlight, it's VARA has issued the most comprehensive regulation in UAE and maybe globally because it's really dedicated for that. And the regulation for VARA, it's fully aligned with FATF. So just another factor maybe to consider that the country is on a gray list. So adding these virtual assets in this, it's as a high risk, it's becoming maybe putting the country in some troubles, but that has been mitigated. The fact that VARA is fully dedicated for the VASP. The regulation which they have issued for the 7 licensed activity is very comprehensive in terms of framework, corporate governance, proof of reserve they have to for the VASP, and in terms of the controls, what the VASP they need to control. And from a financial crime perspective, it's fully aligned with the guidance, recommendation 10, recommendation 15, and the red flags issued by FATF. So that will bring VARA as one of the comprehensive regulation is for the VASP and to promote UAE and especially Dubai as a hub going forward for the VASPs.
I'd like to echo the statements of my 2 panelists as well. But Binance recognizes the importance of having a clear regulatory framework that we can adhere to. It needs to be consistent within the guidelines, and it needs to be stable. So that allows businesses like Binance or the other exchanges to come and have a clear roadmap where they're going forward in order to operate in a regulated manner. And then we can afford proper client protection. Consumer protection is obviously a cornerstone of regulated entities. And Binance being a user-focused company, it's integral to our operations. It's in the DNA of Binance. So the Dubai and UAE has really given us this footprint to put down here. UAE has seen great leadership from the senior leadership of the country in order to recognize Web3 economy is an economy of the future. And you need to build that by bringing in experts globally, all members of the ecosystem, from large players such as Binance, they're even smaller players. So allowing them to come here to set up will be a sort of cornerstone of building for the future.
Great. I think as a follow-up to that, Alex, it would be good to understand what are the licensing requirements in the UAE, both for VARA as well as the ADGM, and why should companies outside the UAE consider getting a license here? What are the commercial considerations and otherwise? And would be great to understand or get a better understanding of your experience since you worked firsthand on this.
Absolutely. So the regulatory frameworks of both ADGM and Dubai Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority provide us clarity and security for industry players and users, and are very robust. As Kokila said, ADGM came out 2018, 2019, and added the asset class within their regulations to add within as they were international financial free zone. And they had guidance issued, I think, in 2020, 2021, as the marketplace and the industry evolved. And here we see MTFs and custodians and broker dealers. VARA was established, as Kokila said again, as a virtual asset specific regulator. And what I think the key difference as well, not just as it's very specific, is they launched an MVP program. So it's analogous to a sandbox where, you know, players such as Binance came, collaborated, had consistent dialogue, all the VASPs and the regulator about building this framework. And then we built evidence-based policy design, and which has come into fruition recently with the FMP program, where each of the services are captured in specific rulebooks for the client.
Great. I think Hafid and Kokila, it'd be great to understand, I mean, in terms of commercial considerations and even timelines, what have your experiences been with some of the licenses that you've helped companies apply for? And what have been the key drivers for them applying for a license in either of these jurisdictions, right? Either under VARA or the ADGM?
Yeah, just to add on from, sorry, Hafid, do you want to go first?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Just to add on from Alex's point, one needs to keep in mind that when we're applying for these virtual asset licenses, these are all regulated financial licenses in the UAE. We do have a free zone license for what we say proprietary crypto trading, ones where you are trading or you're investing against your own coins and investments and not doing it as in principal or as an agent for anyone else. So those are the only segments that we've seen which are under the non-regulated segment. But rest across, be it ESCA, VARA, ADGM, DIFC, or CBOA, these are all regulated. So one has to keep it in mind that when we're talking about regulated requirements, the disclosures, the requirement, the licensing, the policies, the standards that need to be met are going to be of international level. So we are talking about time frame minimum of 6 months to up to, in some cases, in all honesty, could even stretch to 10 months, 11 months, depending on the readiness of the VASP who's applying to UAE. So one has to keep that much timeline in mind. And also one of the key requirements, be it ADGM or VARA, they're very specific that they want the CSEC, the core team of these VASPs to be based here in UAE. They need to have not just like you cannot have an offshore, or you cannot just be a one-member team and look at getting a financially regulated license. So that has one of the key sectors that they need to keep it in mind. And also Alex mentioned, ADGM came out with their whole multilateral trading facility, MTF. So once you apply for that, we're talking about a long process that needs to go on. Whereas VARA has gone ahead and again classified 7 different categories under which one can apply for as a virtual asset service provider. Remittance payments is again something where I think we're just waiting for more clarity, and maybe Hafid can mention more about that from CB perspective, that it will be VARA as well as we might have some regulations or clarity coming from CB. But interestingly, all have to apply by what we have the international organizations like FATF recommendation, the Basel recommendation, and all have been kept in mind while coming out with these regulations. And going in depth about these capital requirements, now each of these, be it ADGM, be it VARA, DIFC, they all for different activities have different capital requirements. But ADGM mostly has taken the principle where they want to see that you have capital adequacy for at least 6 months in some categories, and in some categories up to 12 months of your operations as a VASP. And VARA again from 800,000 dirhams to up to 1.5 million dirham, depending on your activity and how many activities you want to take as a virtual asset service provider. These capital requirements would change. So in depth, once you identify what is exactly the service you would want to offer in UAE, then there is an extreme clarity on what will be your process here.
Yeah, so just maybe I want to add that, and maybe to answer the question, why commercially the VASP or these virtual assets companies they want to establish in Dubai. I think the first one is Dubai is fostering or being the innovation hub for in the region. And that is coming direction from the top, is to build that economy of the future. It's built on blockchain, built on open finance, and built on basically the innovation part. They're attracting all these fintechs company to be established in UAE, and this is the entity for future, all technology companies, fintechs to be established in UAE. And to facilitate that, there is a clear direction from the top on how to license these entities. So that smooth process for licensing, it's established through the direction from the top. And that's one of the reasons that VARA has been established for example, only to license the VASPs on the virtual assets activities, not only the VASP, but also any virtual assets activities in Dubai will be licensed by VASP. So as we said, in Dubai, the virtual assets VARA is covering Dubai except the IFC, because the IFC, they have the FSA, which is the region, or this is a free zone. Now, on top of that, we have all the free zones that's available in Dubai. So these entities or acting on the virtual assets will be established more on the free zones, which is an easy process to get their commercial license. So once they come and get their commercial license, they will go through a licensing process. So the licensing process in VARA there is a sandbox, which is MVP process, and which facilitate also for the entity. The communication between VARA and the entities is very smooth communication, which they help VARA, they help this entity to be licensed. So there is a phased approach in terms of license. There's a clear requirement what they need to provide, and it's phased approach. On top of that is the communication between the different regulators. So I appreciate there are different regulators in the region. So we have VARA in Dubai, we have the AFC in the FSA in the AFC, we have ADGM, we have also the central bank, because these companies or these VASP, they will be part of the financial ecosystem, financial services. So they will be dealing with the banks. Now, the VASP are regulated by VARA, while the banks are regulated by the central bank. So that communication between VARA and the central bank, the continuous communication to avoid that ambiguity in terms of requirements is there, which help also the VASP to be licensed. So I think if you can see from all the aspects, from commercially and from a regulatory perspective, it's all there to help the VASP to be established in Dubai and to operate from UAE overall.
Great. So yeah, you did touch upon, I guess, banks to a certain extent, especially with everything that's happening in the world with bank crashes, crypto banking crashing as well. A major concern for a lot of companies when they enter a region is does the banking infrastructure support VASPs? And second, of course, as a function of that, it would be great to hear about how actively are financial institutions in the UAE engaged in cryptocurrencies? So I guess panelists would be great to hear about these two items from you.
I mean, it's been helpful. I mean, we've talked about all the different regulators, but it's been helpful with the recent publication from the central bank about how their licensed institutions deal with the VASPs, and then how each of these licensed financial institutions, mainly the banks, view the different jurisdictions. And it just sets them some guidelines and some rules for them to engage VASPs. And it really, say, like Hafid said, it gives them clarity when you're dealing with the two regulators. So the entity which is providing the service to the end client are regulated. And then now we understand how these different regulators are talking, and that's been very public. But this clarity has really helped. And I think that's really going to kickstart a lot of innovation here in the region.
Okay, maybe I just want to add here, because I've been working closely with the banks on this and helping the banks to onboard the VASP and provide them with a client money account, which is I think the primary need of the VASPs to operate in UAE. And this is also one of the primary requirements for VARA to provide license to VASP is to have a client money account, first of all. Now, I think what I want to say, the financial institution, especially the banks, are part of that ecosystem and play a critical role in onboarding the VASPs. Now, what we have seen that the banks now is enhancing, or the banks are enhancing their financial crime framework is to onboard the VASP, because is different. It's under different regulator. And what helped that is the new guidance issued by the central bank, which is related to risks on virtual assets for the financial institution and the VASP. That document is very comprehensive and set out all the requirements for the banks to establish a relationship with VASP and to offer products, especially client money account to the VASPs. That's framework. It's basically also communication from the central bank is to part of this ecosystem and to help the VASP to be established in UAE. So they define clearly what are the requirements, what they need to do, which is, in my view, it's not a different requirement. It's a very straightforward requirement in terms of what is expected from me as a control to be implemented to onboard the VASP, which, yes, it's very old. These requirements are fully aligned also with FATF, just to make sure that this is not something which is very stringent. It's very aligned with FATF, and would help also this to be part of the ecosystem and to help the VASP to be operating in UAE. So I think the banks currently, they are enhancing their framework and they are maybe ready to start onboarding the VASP and provide them client money account.
Great. I think then moving on to my next question, also our favorite topic, AML CFT. So in terms of advice to VASPs, what are some best practices for AML CFT? What have you seen in terms of usage of blockchain analytics? And I think now sanctions compliance is definitely a key priority for VASPs all over. So could you touch a little bit upon these three areas and what VASPs should watch out for as they go through a licensing process in the UAE?
I'll start first. As we've sort of spoken in previous questions, there's a heavy focus on FATF in the country, and so the FATF guidelines are very prescriptive and easy to follow, and there's no leeway there. So if you want to get regulated in the UAE, you need to hold to these guidelines. So yeah, strong KYC for clients coming on board, transaction monitoring for AML, and then as tools such as Merkle Science for forensics. on transactions versus using cryptocurrency virtual assets. And I think that's probably been the only thing slowing down growth and innovation in the UAE is the financial institutions, the legacy financial institutions, the banks have had to spend some time learning about these technologies, training their compliance teams, training adding this framework into their policies in order to serve VASPs.
Maybe just I want to add what Alex is saying. I think from AML CFT, there is two aspects here. It's first of all from the VASP, and the second from the banks or the financial institution. If I want to mention or to start with the VASP, there is a comprehensive regulatory framework issued, let's say, by VARA on what are all the expected financial crime compliance framework they have to establish in the region here, or by the VASP, starting from the onboarding, the due diligence, the sanction screening, the transaction monitoring. I want to say the reporting to the of suspicious transaction to AML, and recently also now the VASP also have been granted the license to register to Go AML to report all the suspicious transaction. They have also to implement a bespoke system or technology for that transaction monitoring, given that the nature of their transaction or the nature of their business, it's special in nature because they are dealing in both crypto and fiat. So that crypto analysis or crypto monitoring should be there by well-known technology firms or technology companies to do that. So that's, I think, and this is the also from VARA, there is a continuous monitoring on this VASP, or specifically on the AML, and there is what we have discussed with VARA before. They have also implemented kind of regular monitoring and daily monitoring on the transaction or the conversion to crypto from on the VASPs. So that's on the VASP side, and VARA is managing also or supervising this. Now on the bank side, the bank side will act, I want to say, maybe as a correspondent bank for the VASP, because all the fiat transaction of the VASP will go through the banks. So the banks, they have to conduct their due diligence as per the central bank for the onboarding and monitoring of the transaction. However, the challenge that we are facing now maybe with the banks, that they see only one leg of the transaction, which is the fiat transaction. They then see from the banks, which is the crypto transaction. So that means that the banks will rely on the VASPs for all their controls in terms of how they will onboard their customers. What are the profile of this customer? What are the transaction? What are the adequacy of the transaction monitoring, the same or the sanction screening that they have or the VASP have, and how to demonstrate this is to the banks. So that's enough. Now, having said that, the banks from the central bank, because the banks are regulated by the central bank, not from VARA. So that's another challenge. The central bank has issued the guidance, and still their banks are responsible and accountable for the due diligence. So that's also, the banks have to implement their due diligence control, and to start onboarding the VASP, they have to implement all the monitoring controls. That means that also when they rely on the VASP had to cooperate with the banks to provide them with the evidence of the adequacy of their controls, because it's part of the ecosystem, as I said, is to make this is as successful or crypto as a successful in UAE. So that's collaboration. I think it's there with the supervision from both the central bank on the banks and the guidance issued by the central bank specifically on financial crime, and also the supervision from VARA on this. And also on top of that, the two regulators, central bank and VARA, there is a continuous discussion in terms of, I'll take one example, which is there's an overlap. I think the payment, crypto payment, which is, it's demonstrate one of the great example on how is the collaboration between the regulators on this. So crypto payment, there is two elements of that. There is crypto and there's the fiat. The VARA, they have 7 licensed activity, and they have issued before only 6 rule books. And the payment and remittances was on hold because of the continuous discussion with the central bank till they agreed who will be responsible for what. Okay, so recently, I think 2 weeks ago, VARA, they have issued the payment regulation or the payment rule book for the banks, which they specify exactly who is responsible for it. All the virtual assets crypto payments will be with Vara because they have the capability, they build the capabilities and the capacity to monitor that. And the leg which is related to the fiat will be under central bank because that will be part of the payment system. So still the payment system is with the central bank and under the license of the central bank. So that demonstrates how is the collaboration between Vara and the central bank on this activity and how this can be leveraged, both of them, for the banks to deal with the VASPs.
Great. Yeah, I think one of the questions that has been coming up in the Q&A has just been a comparative analysis of similarities and differences between the regulatory frameworks. I think VARA and ADGM are obviously the most popular or well-known. So for a VASP coming from outside, which one is more relevant? Is it dependent on their business line, the geography they intend to target, and what are the similarities and differences in the regulatory frameworks? And if you were to, how would they decide which one to go for first, and why even get both, right? So just some clarifications that would be very useful to the audience.
Yeah, so interestingly, all these regulations or legislations that have come out have been based on, say, a FATF guideline or a OECD guidelines or ASCO. So very international and standard definitions. The main elements that one needs to keep it in mind is that which is going to be your target market. Are you looking at offering your services only in UAE? Or you're looking at more of a global product and you want to use UAE as a headquarter for it? So all these regulations, be it from ADGM, DIFC, VARA, have been curated keeping that in mind. So when a VASP enters UAE, one of the main questions we ask them, what is your primary goal? Are you looking at launching an AED-based or an AED paired product if you're looking at launching your own new service or an offering? Or you are looking at doing an asset token or an asset-backed token and your assets are based out of UAE, or we're talking about global assets. So all these factors need to be kept in mind. And also, where is it that they're going to have their regional headquarters based? They're looking at offering their services across the MENA region or across GCC, or it is a very UAE specific that they want to launch with. So these elements need to be kept in mind. Capital requirements, as I said, are pretty much going in ADGM. The formula is mainly on your operational expenses for 6 months to 12 months, depending on the activity you're going for. And again, in VARA, it is between, as I said, 800,000 to 1.5 million. And also depending on what are the different, so say if you want to be a broker dealer, now some of the clients have taken an approach where they have bifurcated their business and said, if I want to go for a broker dealer license, I want to apply to VARA. But if I am looking at offering an exchange service, I want to look at a license from ADGM. So it's not an uncommon practice for a VASP to have multiple different licenses across the region, especially because you have the option of going to different regulators and getting yourself licensed. So that's the main over the top that I can tell you that these are the main requirements. Essentially, what one has to keep in mind is their core team to be here, capital requirements, and the robustness in their technology. Like it has to be extremely robust for a regulator. So keep in mind that VARA is well equipped, so is ADGM. So it's not going to be that they're looking at a VASP or a exchange or a trading platform for the first time. So you need to keep it in mind that you are going to deal with regulators who are going to be actively involved throughout your application. So this is what we find different, mainly if we look at the other global regulators where you submit an application and then you wait for a feedback for a couple of weeks or months and you just get a straightforward answer. But in UAE, especially ADGM and VARA, these are very active regulators where they would want to discuss every point, your business, so if you presented a policy, you need to keep it in mind that they will go through it with you and they are very involved in everything that you submit to them. So one has to be ready. it is not something that you submit an application and then you later on build up a business use case. You need to be absolutely ready before you go ahead and file it. And also because VARA's come out with the regulations this year in 2023, but they started the whole MVP with the big industry players last year. There were many players who started coming and operating here. So VARA has actually gone ahead and created a license category, which is called a legacy VASP. That is, you come and submit to them now that post February 2023, there is an IDQ form, there is a process by which you go and submit that this is the business that I have already been doing in UAE. So you need to come and disclose everything that you've done and what were the industry standards and measures that you kept in mind in what we say in lack of regulations. So that's a very interesting approach VARA has taken, where it's not said that, okay, we're going to go and close down these businesses. They have invited these businesses to come and disclose.
Great. Yeah, I think in terms of the final question, or one of the key things, again, the topic of the Merkel meets as well. What do you see for the UAE in the next 12 to 24 months? Do you think it's poised to become the leader for crypto innovation, and why? Right. So it would be great to hear from all the panelists about this before we move on to the Q&A section.
In all modesty, I can say it's not poised to become the jurisdiction. It is the jurisdiction already. With the regulatory clarity and the legislative support that UAE is already offering, I'm yet to see any other country being so supportive.
Yeah, so I echo that on that aspect. So I think what I've seen now in the region here and what's going on globally with the challenge that the VASP have globally, I think UAE is attracting and being an attraction for the fintech companies, not only the VASP, to be established in UAE and to help this company to contribute to the economy of the country. So if you're thinking about the future of the economy, about the smart contracts, about the blockchain, the innovation, the fintechs, I think there is a clear direction, as I said before, is to help all these companies to be established in UAE and to provide the right regulatory framework for this company to act as per the regulation and align with the global practice. I mean here, mainly the FATF recommendation. So that's happening there. And not only that, is what's make this different is the smooth discussion and the active discussion between the regulation or the regulator and the fintech companies. So it's not about submitting the application and wait for a feedback response. There is always an active communication on what is required from, or what is the expectation from the VASP and what is the expectation from the regulator in this aspect. And I have seen this is predominantly with, because I'm close with with VARA, so I've seen that. I've seen different workshops. It's happening in the country here where the regulator is present, where the different technology companies who are part of the ecosystem discussing all these requirements and what sharing all their knowledge and challenges. And the special of VARA is listening to these challenges and try to mitigate these challenges and help them to operate in UAE. So I think it's a different mindset in terms of licensing. It's a smooth process in terms of licensing this and helping them to be part of UAE and especially in Dubai to operate from here. So that will have an attraction from all these companies to be established in UAE.
Additionally to the regulations, which we obviously talked about at length, the infrastructure and the actual ability to relocate and live here and service global companies as well. It's well situated, the time zone, the transport links are phenomenal. I mean, there's quick flights to, I think, over 2 billion people. And, Binance has really capitalized on that. I think at last count, we have about 700 people working in Dubai. And that's a testament to how quickly we can grow and build a business in the region. So the regulations help by being clear and structured and stable. But the country also gives you the ability to grow your business here.
Great. Yeah. And I think even the future outlook would be great to hear about. So what do you see in the next 12 to 24 months? I get that there would just be a natural progression of more companies applying, and you see the migration or the move towards the UAE. But is there anything companies should watch out for that might be special in the UAE?
As you know, as all of us are pretty aware that UAE has a very robust framework, then UAE also has a very sizable investment or retail use case of these virtual assets growing here in the market. So any virtual asset service provider who wants to market or target UAE customers now needs to be very well aware that they need to be properly licensed to do that in UAE. So like we get queries from clients who are existing, like are regulated elsewhere and want to offer their services, want to onboard UAE clients. Now, specific clarity has come from CBUAE, from Central Bank and from VARA and from the likes of ADGM, DIFC, that these companies need to be licensed to offer their financial services in UAE. So one cannot say that I'm a global entity and I'm offering my services here. If it's a financial product, one needs to be licensed. So this is what we are going to see more and more enforcement actions, which have already started, be it only from VARA, ADGM, or even from Dubai courts and federal courts also very actively working in this space, that if you are dealing with virtual assets and you do not have the required license for it, it could be a big legal issue for those entities. And not just entities, but also the key management, the individuals who are operating and working in this space without the license. So we'll see more enforcement actions, as well as we'll see this market going deeper. We could see a launch and a lot of support from central banks, especially now for stable coins. Or we also know that UAE Central Bank has already launched a CBDC project. So we'll see more even developers and companies moving to this space.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
yeah,
please, Alex.
thank you. Yeah, just to sort of build on that, what we're seeing is a maturation of both the ecosystem and the players here, sort of coming from these enforcement actions. It shows that we're now at a new stage, sort of beyond the grassroots innovation to moving into financial services, and so both the regulators and service providers and the VASPs need to understand that. So the whole industry is maturing, and it's a collaborative effort with the regulators here and the VASPs, yeah, it's going to provide a safer, better place for users to transact cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, so just one thing I need to add. I think definitely from a regulatory perspective, there will be more development in terms of regulation, but there will be also development in terms of the business, right? So business of the virtual assets. And what I can see, the two maybe development will happen in the next maybe 1 to 3 years, is the banks will start offering their virtual assets or start offering virtual assets to their customers through partnership with VASPs. So that's I think I've seen a couple of banks now, they're putting maybe a business case in terms of how they can offer the virtual assets to their customers, and that will require a partnership with the VASPs. And this also open an opportunity for the VASP to partner with the banks on this aspect. So that's one. The two, as a retail or in retail space, there will be payment in virtual assets. And I can see now there are really big real estate companies start accepting payment in virtual assets. I appreciate still there is a fiat which is going, but that is all the development. And this is, we'll see that it's happening more in the future and in very high speed of increase in terms of accepting virtual assets payments. through when you buy any real estate or any other assets, through paying that by a wallet or through virtual assets or cryptocurrencies. So I think there will be development from both sides, from the business side and from a regulatory side, which they have to manage all these risks associated with this different development in the business.
Great. Yeah, thank you, panelists. I think we're all excited about what's next for the UAE and the regulatory landscape here. Moving to some of the questions, I think one definitely is a follow-up about enforcement actions. I know, Kokila, we were speaking about enforcement actions in the UAE. So what are some offenses that VARA can take enforcement action against? Or in your experience, what are some types of enforcement actions you've seen in the past in the UAE, and how can companies avoid them?
So one has to understand that VARA's jurisdiction is for the Emirate of Dubai. We're not talking at the UAE level with it. So we need to look at the federal laws also of the country and existing laws of that. So one major offense that VARA has highlighted is that one needs to get approval from VARA even before they go and market their services. So if you're an international player and you would want to come and offer your services, say that at an event that happens here in UAE, there is a process by which you need to get yourself approved. If that's not done, there could be strict enforcement actions and there are huge penalties against that. Then also you have to have a correct license. So if you have a license as a MTF or as a exchange service and you do not have the ancillary license, as they say, for a custody, but you are providing, now that again is a penal, there is a penalty on it, because you need to not only have the license, but have the correct license to offer your virtual asset services. And that's at a VARA and at an ADGM level. But to talk at a basic UAE legal framework, the laws are very clear that anybody who launches any business in UAE, be it virtual assets or a non-virtual asset, you need to have a proper legal entity. You need to have an office space here. You need to have some presence here in UAE before you go ahead and offer your services to UAE residents. And there's no escape from it. And as we were discussing earlier, we're now seeing these court cases, which are interestingly, and these are not only just civil claims or civil commercial disputes, but there are criminal action to it, because the whole AML CFT gets triggered if you are offering your services, or you were offering your services in virtual assets here, licensed anywhere else, but offering it to UAE clients. We have those court cases now where the managers of those entities have been not only just penalized, but there's a criminal action against them from the Dubai courts. So one has to be very mindful of what are the laws and regulations here in UAE, and we have ample clarity on it now.
Right. Yeah, I think some of the participants are from the EU region. Our last Merkle Meets was on MICA. So as a follow-up to that, I think one of the questions asks, what are your views on which UAE regulator will offer the best opportunities for international global passporting of some sort?
I think all regulators are aiming for a global passporting, mainly because of the nature of the business is such. You cannot just say, oh, I'm an exchange and offering services only to one specific geography. When we talk about fintech or Web3 space, it's a global space. How soon will that be is something, I don't know, that we can comment. But yes, is there an inclination? Definitely there is one. We were recently part of a consortium where all the central banks of the Arab region were sitting and discussing that. Can there be a sort of an arrangement or an understanding between especially the Arab countries to start with, where if not like a proper passporting, but recognition of an authorized license from one entity being acceptable in another jurisdiction. So there are talks around that, and that's all like, in a public domain that we can talk about.
Yes, I echo that, and I have seen recently, for example, between UAE and Bahrain. So there are a lot of us who are operating in Bahrain, and still they will operate here. There is kind of, it's not yet fully there, but it will be there in the future. It started already between at least two countries, UAE and Bahrain, and I'm sure it will cover at least all the GCC countries.
Got it. Yeah, the next question is around stablecoins. There is a fintech looking to launch a potential stablecoin. They wanted to understand what type of license they may require from the ADGM, and would they require a separate license from the central bank? And would it be a VASP license or a different stablecoin issuer license for cross-border work in the region?
Yeah, so payment tokens have been very interesting conversation. As Hafid deeply mentioned that this is where we're seeing even an overlap, and especially from VARA and Central Bank of UAE. They both in the last 2 weeks have come out with the frameworks for such issuances. But interestingly, CB UAE has had this since 2021 in our retail payment services and card schemes recognition, RPCSE. There is a whole provision for if you were to launch stable coins, what is the process and what is the licensing application one needs to file at Central Bank of UAE. Having said that, your ADGM has had a different rule books covered already about, they haven't called it stable coins as such, they have called it fiat-backed tokens. So these are tokens which are backed 1:1 pegged against a fiat currency. And ADGM has a full licensing procedure for the same. So when it comes to AED pairing, one needs to look at applying for the license to Central Bank of UAE. And we have now seen the clarity even from VARA, which is limited to virtual assets. As you know, as Hafid mentioned, that the virtual assets, the crypto aspect is covered by VARA. But when it comes to fiat and settlement and clearing, it's all going to be with Central Bank of UAE.
Great. So I think the last question that we have time for is around bank relationships. I was reading an article about how Hong Kong Central Bank is working closely with UAE Central Bank to promote more collaboration and more crypto. So what's the reality of this? Because in several jurisdictions, you actually see that banks are still very reluctant to work with crypto companies. So in the UAE, what are each of you seeing?
As mentioned, the public guidance that the CBUAE came out with has been the biggest step here. Before, probably there was a little bit of ambiguity or lack of understanding about how each of the entities would interact, but that was, I think, publicized a couple of months ago. And then at that point, all parties are sort of engaging towards creating a positive environment for banking VASP.
So just I want to add on this. I think I've been working with the banks on this. So you said the banks are reluctant, maybe yes, but if you see the guidance from the central bank, it's a positive guidance that the central bank is not prohibiting that type of relationship. And that's not restricting, that's the banks should not onboard the VASP. The central bank has issued the guidance, which is very positive to say, okay, the relationship is permitted, but there is some requirements or there is a clear guidance in terms of requirement. What is expected from the central bank is to onboard, or from the banks to onboard these VASP, given that, again, these VASP are under another regulator. That's one. So I think we will be seeing in the future, it's more collaboration between the VASP and the financial institution, because the successful of the VASP will rely also on the banks to provide service to the VASP. These VASP cannot operate in UAE without a client money account as a bank. And the client money account should be with the banks. And to open that client money account, there should be controls implemented by the banks to monitor that. And what's required from the VASP is to be also open with the banks, because the banks will rely on the controls of the VASP. They will be relying on their procedure, on their onboarding procedure, on their transaction monitoring. So the banks cannot provide that service if they don't have the comfort from the BAS that they design and implement this control as per the regulation to continue the relationship. Otherwise, I think that relationship will fail. So it's basically, I want to say, it's based on the mutual trust between the BAS and the banks, and also a transparency between the BAS and the banks to make sure that it's a successful relationship.
Great. I think that brings us to the end of this Merkle Meets. So thanks a lot, panelists. Really appreciate your insights and your time. And thank you, attendees, for attending the webinar. We will be sending out a summary with both a recording and just some general guidelines on UAE regulations to all the attendees here. And I know we've gotten several requests from the US to also get a video sent over. So in case you missed part of the webinar, that's something that'll be sent over later. And yeah, stay in tune. Please follow Merkle Science on LinkedIn and Twitter. And our next Merkle Science Meets will be about Hong Kong and the regulatory environment there. So stay in tune and hope you join the next one as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.